Hey everyone. So I'm starting the next iteration of my course, the Gouache Mastery Blueprint, starting on May 16th of 2024, and I wanted to share with you just a little sort of a taste of what it's like to work with me in a relatively small setting. This is just an example of a one-on-one I had with a prospective student who won a free consultation with me during my last webinar. And that webinar was about how to tame the gouache drying shifts. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But this is just to give you an example of how I try to work with people one-on-one, trying to figure out where they're at and what I feel like is the best course of action for them. And this is typical of how I work with my students within my course. And this is a little bit different because there wasn't really a lesson plan or an assignment that I gave her to go over. So I'm just kind of jumping into this one blind and trying to just assess where she's at and where I think that her biggest areas of focus should be next. She had some ideas of where she wanted to go with her work, so I definitely took that into account as I was talking with her. Oh, one more thing. Just so you know, it did record in a little bit of a low res version, unfortunately. I didn't really have the ability to change the settings in Zoom, so the recording's usually a better quality than that, but just bear with it for this one. Anyhow, there are a lot of tips in this session that I think a lot of people who are watching this video and are interested in gouache could get some use out of. So that's the main reason that I wanted to share this with you here today. Without further ado, let's get into it.
You said you're a beginner with gouache, but it looks like you have some.
That's fine, right there.
This one's yours. Okay,
And
great.
that's just strictly watercolor.
Okay.
I'd really like to figure out how to, because I like some of the transparency, but I also like the texture that gouache can give you and,
Right.
those things. So that's fine, right there.
This one's yours. Okay,
And
great.
that's just strictly watercolor.
Okay. And then this one is also of yours.
That's mine, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, the first thing I see in this one is a little bit of a drawing / perspective issue with the bed itself. Besides that, so what were the issues that were giving you trouble with in this one?
Well, I was approaching it as a traditional watercolor only painting, and it just didn't work. And I thought, well, this seems like a good one to try to experiment with gouache. And so
Okay.
things did get a little wonky. The only part that's really showing through that's watercolor is the curtain through the window, the curtain and a little the lighter flooring. The rest of it, I was just slapping on gouache, having no idea what, mixing a lot of water with it, which I didn't realize, maybe you shouldn't do that. Now I know maybe you shouldn't, but
Right.
so it was just an attempt to figure out, is this something I want to do? But I like it. I don't like this in particular, but I like what can be done with gouache, so that's kind of what I'm interested in.
Okay. Yeah. So, do you have any examples of paintings where you did just start with gouache from the outset?
No.
Okay. So, how long have you been painting with gouache now?
With gouache, a nanosecond of time. I've been painting with watercolor a long time, but
Gotcha.
not. And I like watercolor, but I find it very frustrating, especially when things go wrong. There's
Yeah, I agree.
there's no going back, and it's just like you may have just spent a whole lot of time on it, and it's just not going to happen. You know what I mean? So,
Right. Yeah, totally.
but it has its limits.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I agree. That's one of the reasons I just don't really focus on just transparent watercolor myself. I've found that I can do most of what I want to do with watercolor in gouache. The only things that I have really trouble with is preserving luminosity, like especially if you're working with it really watered down in a semi-transparent way, just because that's just not the way that gouache really works. So what I tend to do is I will still sometimes put down really thin down gouache, just so that I have a base to work off of, like especially if
Hmm.
I'm painting something with a lot of light, kind of filtering through. If I'm painting something like backlit or something, and then
Hmm.
I'll usually just put down a really thin tone of some sort, usually like the color of the light. And then and yeah, I tend to work it with it a little bit more akin to an oil painter, just because that's what I my background is really. So I
Hmm.
start kind of that whole fat over lean principle in a way with
Hmm.
gouache, where I start lean and then just keep um,
Building. Yeah.
layering. Yeah.
Yeah,
So do you like working with watercolor paper? I mean, I do too, so I was just
I
curious.
do. I don't really have a lot of experience with other papers other than just fiddling around.
Hmm.
I've read, I've read more about gouache than, I've actually done anything with it.
Yeah.
It seems like um, there's just the possibilities are greater, in some respects to get that texture that I really like. Because I used to paint with oils too years
Okay.
ago,
Hmm.
which, they're great, but if you live in a small space, people don't like it. It's not
Right,
fair.
true.
My
Yeah.
husband's like, you need to go to the garage.
Uh-huh.
So, but anyway, but you can't really get that. I mean, you can get a little bit of texture with watercolor, but not like what I like.
Sure,
So,
sure. Yeah. So, yeah, just as an example here, let me just turn off screen share really quickly. This is a painting I'm okay, yeah. So this is a painting I'm working on actually right now. Probably not getting. This is on like Bao Hong rough watercolor, but it's just showing you a bit where I started very thin, kind of down here is a little bit more of the wash kind of still coming through. I'm starting to put opaque color over it, but it's probably sort of where I feel like you're trying to get to, where you're getting a lot of this texture just by the paper. And so yeah, there's just a lot of kind of what I guess you would call impasto with gouache. I mean, you're not really supposed to paint super thick with gouache. It will
right.
crack on you if you paint it with any actual real impasto with no media mixed into it. But you can kind of simulate the feel of just painting on like rough canvas with oil by the dry brushing, the texture, the type of brush you use with it. Like for example, I'm using for the most part on this one, this is just like a golden Taklon, like the nylon synthetic brushes, and that's totally. And then also the other like stiffer brushes, like the Trical Crimson Taklon, those are also really good for getting that texture. So a lot of it, like, what kind of brushes are you using right now? Have you went out to get some new
I've been
brushes,
using,
or are you
I
still
mean,
using watercolor?
I'm using watercolor, my older watercolor brushes, not my newer ones,
Got you. Okay.
and which is, not, excuse me, not very successful.
Yeah, what you'll find usually is working with watercolor brushes. They soak up too much of the water, which, for watercolor is fine. But when you're
Right.
working with gouache, it's a lot of it, you're dealing with really way less water inside of your brush a lot of the times when you're
Right.
starting to build up. Um, yeah, I would definitely recommend picking ups that are they're usually kind of more marketed toward acrylic, except I would recommend getting the short handle ones.
Yeah.
I find that
Yeah.
the long handle ones don't work well, especially when you're working in your to your paper or whatever.
Right. And sometimes I use an acrylic, or not acrylic, but a synthetic brush in watercolor. But
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
I just cut the handles off. Sometimes they're
Hmm.
good. So, but yeah, it's like way too much brush for, you know.
Right, totally. Yeah, I do the same too. When I find a brush I really like. Yeah, there was actually I've been actually experimenting with this bristle brush I placed somewhere, but it was are you familiar with Kim, his work? He's a
Yes.
really yeah, he's a really
I
good gouache painter, and somebody
Yeah.
told me what kind of brush he uses, and I just picked it up, and it seems to be working okay. Um
One of the paintings I sent you that I liked was one of his.
Oh,
So
okay. The one of it
the
looked like
street
a
scene,
street. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Oh, interesting.
I,
All right.
I love his work. I think he's, I love your work too. But that's, there's just that look you can't get with watercolor.
That's interesting. So these are examples of where you're trying to go with your art, basically,
Well, that's where I'd
in a
like to
way.
go. I don't, I don't really have any experience with gouache other
Hmm.
than I find it really, I just love it. So,
So I'm looking at your work, and is there anything in particular that you're trying to, get to the next level as far as gouache goes? Like, there's something particularly that you're working on right now.
well, I'm just, I have a background from, many years ago of doing a lot of work with figure drawing and that sort of thing. And I'm interested in getting back to that, whether it's don't really do portraits, but just doing the figure in space, whether it's an interior or something like that. So
Sure, sure.
that really interests me. And I do like landscapes, but I like things that are a little less traditional, more of not necessarily a cityscape, but just things that are interesting in a different kind of way. You know what I mean? So the class I took in watercolor was just, it was great. I really enjoyed it. A lot
Hmm.
of practice in learning to do a landscape and do skies and all of those kinds of things. But it's very traditional, so I'd like to be a little less rigid in the scenes that I do.
Oh, okay. So you're talking more about subject matter in that
Yes,
regard.
yeah, and it's subject matter as well as just I like the idea of being able to put down a layer of you know if I can't do it in gouache, a layer of watercolor that has that translucent look to it, and then adding the gouache on top, building it up from there.
Yeah, there's an artist, Eric Tiemens, who I studied under, well, not really studied under, but I took a, he does that. He starts with watercolor and just kind of blends the two mediums together. Let me see if I could find any of his works I can um in example of here we go. It looks like to me that he's starting with the tones of the in the water are very watered down here. So I'm guessing that's probably watercolor he's starting with, probably in
Mhm.
the shadows as well. And then he's saving the gouache for just putting on top of these tones. And I worked similar to that in a lot of my work as well, but I just water down my gouache. I don't necessarily feel the need
Mhm.
to start with watercolor
Mhm. So, so
necessarily.
you're getting the colors that you want in the brightness by just watering it down, the gouache.
Pretty much, yeah. I personally don't feel the need to have to switch to watercolor for this kind of thing, especially if he's working with a lot of browns and things like that too. Watering down a brown in gouache or watercolor is not really going to make a big difference in that. And then also, like I said before, if I'm working with something that's like really backlit scene, overall tone is like maybe like a gold. Um, I don't mind starting with gouache either, but you can start with watercolor as well in that regard. Also, you can just tone it with watercolor, and from what I've found with watercolor, it tends to not be as dis over the layering as you would with gouache. A lot more highly concentrated pigment a lot of times in order
Mhm.
to create that opacity in the paint. So it's probably not even a bad idea to start with watercolor if you plan on doing a lot of with gouache. So
Mhm.
that is definitely a possibility there as far as like
Okay.
a direction to go with how you set up the process. And yeah, so if you're already kind of familiar with gouache and um, or not gouache, with watercolor, and you can set up your picture, your composition with, drawing it out at first and then putting some washes of watercolor and then putting gouache over it to get the opaque layering and like the rendering stages of things, especially with a lot of there's a lot of opportunity there to start kind of thin and then just with watercolor, then build up with some body color over it with gouache. So that could be an interesting way to go for you.
Okay.
So yeah, then when I'm looking at the water, so I think this is a good watercolor just on its own, and I guess the only part of it that maybe would invite a little bit more gouache on top of it is maybe rendering out of some of the rocks and stuff that are happening here, and it's actually a little bit hard to actually know what we're looking at here in this area. The bank of the river here, is it supposed to be grass or is it
It's
dirt?
rock. It's a lot of rock. It's a
It's
lot
a
of
lot
rock.
of rocks.
Yeah,
Okay.
but it's like
So,
a flat. It didn't have a lot of definition in it. Sort of
oh,
a
okay.
flat rock of some sort. And there is some gouache in the grass that I did. In the what is that? The
Oh,
left.
over here, there's a little bit
There is
of,
gouache that I used.
okay. I think, yeah, where you're getting like a little bit of kind of this thin, sort of almost washed out color. I think that just adding a little stronger color into some of these areas here might be a direction to go with in here. It's hard to tell, look, not having reference to without yeah, just kind of going off of my own just kind of instinct that I would see when I'm looking at this here. Um, so yeah, you're saying it was like one kind of large rock or just
Yeah,
kind of
like
oh, okay.
like a big shiny. No, well, I don't know if it was shiny in particular, but just one
Hmm.
large flat rock with some little veining in it.
Got
So,
you. Okay. Yeah.
and I was trying to keep the focus towards the back of the where the creek meets the foliage back in there.
Yeah, it's definitely, yeah, I'm getting this area as the focal point area there. And a nice little juxtaposition of, I love the very moody kind of misty background here. And I don't think you necessarily want to put any more detail into this tree here either. So just adding with gouache, just like a few well-defined parts of the leaves and the branches of this kind of bush here. It's probably all it really needs. Like a really interesting painting in the way that you can have good focus on the areas that you want people to
Hmm.
really be looking. Me, I think the part of the painting that holds my attention the most is actually this tree, and I think it's because it's defined shape wise. It's really well defined in a way that feels natural and not very feel overworked. And
Hmm.
I'd say overall the painting doesn't feel overworked to me either. If anything, there's just little areas that could probably be worked up a little bit more. Tree and this little bits of bush here could just be a little bit slightly better defined. And yeah, I think that if you're using gouache, that makes it pretty easy to do because all you need to do here and just put in just a few little very subtle kind of texture or brushwork in here just to better define some of the things happening here. I don't know if you have the reference to go with this, but I would just consult that and see like you don't have to really go very far. You just have to add like a few little
Hmm.
almost just like one or two brush like flicks of the brush the of like that what do you call it? Just kind of that scrubby kind of brush that kind of grows around these
Hmm.
rivers.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, that's probably something I practice doing is just putting in a that like subtle detail. A lot of
Hmm.
times, what I do is I will kind of do like a little bit of a practice kind of stroke with it. Like I might have just a tester paper, like scrap paper, like to just kind of test, like, okay, did I put too much water on my brush? Not enough. So I just kind of do like a practice stroke first to see exactly how the paint is going to lay down on a piece of paper before I commit it to
Yeah.
a painting
I mean,
like that. So
yeah. Yeah, and it's, and since it's a watercolor, at some point you have to stop because bad things happen if you keep going. So,
right,
at least for me anyway, it's like, oh, let's just stop right here. So, you know,
yeah, uh-huh.
that's
I definitely feel that there's a good foundation here as far as like working from watercolor into gouache. So I think it's just going to be, you're brand new to gouache, matter of practicing to see how it integrates with what you're doing with watercolor. But yeah, I give you that inspiration of Eric Tiemann's there because you could see he's somebody who can use both watercolor and gouache in the same painting and to good effect.
make it
So he,
work.
he's
Yeah.
yeah, he's definitely one worth studying as far as that goes. If you want to find more of his work online, just search that out there. But
Okay. Well,
yeah.
I will ask that you have coming up. Maybe you've already
Oh,
filled your
sure.
spot. Um, I don't know how you do it. Is it done through Zoom so it's live? Is that how?
Yeah, very similar to this right now. It's done live, and yeah, I deliver the lessons in similar way, like kind of similar to how I was doing the workshop, where I have the slides to deliver the lessons, and then I do take questions and feedback along the way, and
Hmm.
then the Tuesdays to what we're doing here now. Show me whatever you're working on, and it's going to be probably more geared to the lessons. Like it's probably going to be a little bit more structured than
Hmm.
what we have going on here. But it's basically that's kind of the format. The only thing that I haven't really shared here is the Discord is where I not only do I, host all the materials on there, but I post the replays from the paintings in the Discord channel as well. Or do you not know
No,
what
I'm
I'm
not.
talking
I've
about?
never heard of it.
Oh, okay. So it's basically like kind of like a message app in a way. Um,
Okay.
it, it was originally created to help people who games online communicate with each other, but
Okay.
it's kind of evolved into anybody can create a Discord server, and it's basically like a room, a private are invited to
Okay.
the the app, get to go in there, and they and it's similar to like a Facebook. Everybody
Private.
can see what, yeah, but it's more private. It's better organized. You can have different. So it's similar, I guess, to an old school message board, but it's more private and geared toward a
Okay.
specific
Yeah, the
thing
the
there.
watercolor class had a private Facebook page.
Oh, okay,
So
yeah, it's
I think
similar to that.
it seemed to work okay. I mean, people would make comments on different work that was posted, and the instructor would come visit at some point and also do that as well. So
Right. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, except for it's more its own sort of community inside of the bit more exclusive in that regard.
okay. So
Yeah.
and how many weeks is it? Because I
So it was 6 weeks before, but I extended to 8 weeks because I felt that people were needed just a little bit more time to absorb some lessons. But
Mhm.
yeah, it starts from May 16th and goes to well, it was going to be July 4th, but obviously can't have a class on Independence Day, so
Right.
it's actually going to be a week break and then ends on July 11th.
So how does it work if you're, because that's what I was afraid of, that, I like the idea that it's live, but I'm going to
Mhm.
be gone from the June 13th through, so that would
Oh, okay.
screw that up.
Yeah, so it's always recorded. I always do the recording of the lessons, and then I put them up for replay. I host the videos on Vimeo so that people who are in the Discord can just go to where I posted them in there and just watch them anytime. So yeah,
Okay.
I've definitely had people before who have because of other prior engagements, and
Hmm.
it seemed to work out okay for them that they were able to come back. It is that is kind of a long time to miss a
Yeah,
lot of
that's
classes if you're not able to watch any of them. And
true. But so would
yeah,
you? So I was wondering, this may not be the perfect timing, but would you be doing
Mhm.
another July? Is that or
I haven't yet decided when I will do it. It'll probably, if I do, because what I'm working towards is kind of creating version like this. It's kind of in the beta phases right now, so everything right now. But what I want to do in the future, and probably after this iteration coming here in the spring, what I'm going to do is just the lessons pre-recorded and have people go through them at their own pace, and then every week I'll just be doing the live
that's a
wherever they are.
that's a really good way to do it, because your schedule is can be crazy sometimes.
Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, if that's something you're interested in, it's probably going to be somewhere in the fall.
Okay.
Probably going to take a little bit of a break during the height of summer because I'm going to be doing.
So in the meantime, between now and when I can actually catch you in a lesson plan, what what do
Yeah.
you what do you recommend? Just experimenting, or is there, you know?
Um, yeah, there are definitely things that you can do as far as learning the medium a little bit better. I always recommend people it's actually like one of the first things we do in the class, learning their colors really well. So
Hmm.
I always have people start out with like kind of a color chart,
Hmm.
swatching, that kind of thing, just to know how your colors work.
Okay.
And then beyond just different exercises. I actually need to come a revamp of that plan to myself. The what I found has helped people learn in a way that helps them is practicing smooth gradients with
Mm,
gouache
okay.
because a lot of my students have been landscape painters and they really want to learn how to do skies and clouds and whatnot. And so the first thing I do when I'm painting in gouache is when it's skies is kind of do those soft gradients to really make
Hmm.
the skies feel give myself a good base. What I found that people tend to struggle with just doing smooth gradients of gouache. I think because some people are coming from watercolor and so they're used to starting out
Hmm.
really washy colors. But what I found with gouache that works more effectively is painting a little bit thicker. Even if you're using a lot of water, putting a lot of gouache into that water will also give you a good like wet on wet kind of learning to work wet on wet as a base layer, even if you're painting thinly, will definitely give you a good on just understanding how to do skies better. Yeah, trying out different papers will definitely help as well. Different papers, different brushes. If you can get a hold of just like some relatively inexpensive brushes to work with and see which ones work for you better. Because what I've found is some people really like stiff brushes, other people really like a little bit softer.
Hmm.
The brushes that I've been working with lately that I really like, and you might want to take a note of this, is Princeton Summit off my. Okay, maybe you could see it better now. These here Princeton Summit brushes,
Yeah.
they're white nylon, so they're really found is that they like to keep their shape very very well as far as you wet them and you work with them for a while and they still hold their point very well. So
Okay.
I like that about those. And then some of the other ones that I recommended already were the Trekell Crimson Taklons or the Golden. Those are probably my go-tos. They're very expensive and good for larger areas, just covering a lot of on your paper. Those will probably be good brushes to start with. And then you already have watercolor brushes, so I don't really need to recommend any of like this. This is just a synthetic I was using to lay down the base wash layer. So you have enough of those already, I'm sure.
Yeah, I have more brushes than I need. So I will approach this with a little bit less, not buy so many, you know what I mean? Because you don't really, I mean, I tend to use 3 or 4 brushes consistently.
Right, same. Yeah, I have like different brushes, mostly for different scenarios. But then when I'm actually doing a painting, I tend to stick with like the same like 3 or 4 brushes through the whole thing anyway. Paper as well. Strathmore visual journals, those are probably the best ones for just doing studies with because they're pretty cheap. This one I got on sale for $8, but normally they're in like the $13 to $15 range. But these are excellent for just if you just need a quick small studies for. And then watercolor paper, that's one that you'll probably need to just figure out which ones are the best for your preferred. Some people really like press. I don't. I don't know how you feel about texture on paper, but I personally like a lot of texture on it, so I'll go with cold press and rough.
That's what I like. I like the texture. I think it aids you in some.
It does, yeah. Especially if you're doing soft edges. I like that ragged kind of texture in between shapes, the look of a softer edge.
Yeah. Okay.
Sounds good. Yeah, I think that should give you plenty to work with in the meantime. So I don't want to overwhelm you.
Well, I certainly appreciate you taking the time to do this, and please keep me posted on what happens in the fall because I've just found that watercolor class to be super helpful, especially the feedback. Just trying in the right direction. So I'm sorry I'm going to miss the one and starting in May, but I don't think I can 2 weeks or 2. I think it's even more than 2.
Yeah, 13 to 25th, you said. That's about almost 2 weeks. Yeah, but you would probably miss. Miss like at least 3 live sessions. So maybe that's not ideal for you.
No, it's hard for me to get caught up, because something always seems to happen. So.
Yeah. And so, also what I've kind of had to cut back on the workload that I give into my students. Definitely don't want to fall behind a lot.
A lot to do.
Way.
Yeah. Wonderful.
But so you are on my email list now.
Okay.
So
great.
Yeah, I'll definitely, as things evolve, keep you in the loop as far as that goes. And then even if I don't hear from you, I might just reach out to you personally to see where you're at as things, so you don't miss anything.
And do something.
Yeah.
So I've got to get. I have some basic colors, but I think I need to add a little bit to it. I don't have a burnt sienna and some other things that picked up a set of Winsor Newton on sale, but it was missing some colors that I think might be essential.
Okay. I'll actually send you just the product list of like this. It's just a supply list I send out to people who take workshops and stuff, and you could just take a look at that. And you don't necessarily have to buy anything on it, but it just gives you an overview of what I work with, and it'll probably be a little bit helpful.
Oh, I would think so, Sergio.
Yeah, absolutely. It was nice to talk to you here. And then I'll look forward to hopefully hearing from you later on this year.
Okay, and vice versa. Thank you so much.
All right, well, I hope you enjoyed that. So she was somebody who won the free consultation as a result of watching my webinar on how to deal with taming the gouache drying shift. And that is something people mostly found out about through my email newsletter, but also I was promoting it on social media. And the inspiration for creating that webinar was pretty much through feedback from people who are subscribed to my email newsletter. So what I like to do there is I have a sequence of emails that send out a lot of tips and just useful things about gouache that I put out there periodically. And there's a chance for you to give me direct feedback and ask for what you want help on through there. So it's good to have a nice little back and forth with some of my subscribers there. So if you're interested in that, I'm going to put the link in the description below. And not only do you get a chance to receive all those emails, but you'll also get a free guide on how to paint landscapes in your sketchbook with gouache. And I'm planning on doing a revamp of that a bit. It's been a couple of years since I created that, and you know, all the info in there is still good, but I think that I can add even more to it and make it better. So if you're interested in any of that, please subscribe, and I hope to hear from you there. All right, till next time.